Hey everyone, it's Triple Mango Threat or Ashley, and today I want to talk about a patron deck dedicated to Druby. So this is a Cazur and Ukkima, counters and combat matters. The budget was between $45 and $55, so let's jump right into the deck. So we have partner commanders Cazur and Ukkima. Cazur says that whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. And Ukkima says that whenever it leaves the battlefield, it deals X damage to target player, and you gain X life, where X is its power, and it's also unblockable. So we can definitely take advantage of putting counters on Ukkima because it's unblockable, and Cazur giving it that +1/+1 counter whenever it deals damage to a player. And when it happens to die, we can deal X damage to a player, gain X life, where X is its power. So it's very common. We're going to end up dealing 6 on average and gaining 6 life. So let's talk about the ramp. So we have Arcane Signet, Commander Sphere, Golgari Signet, and Simic Signet. These are all artifact ramp spells, so we pay mana and then we're able to tap them for a color of mana. And then we also have Soul Ring, Talisman of Curiosity, and Resilience. So these are really great mana rocks because Soul Ring, we pay 1, we get 2 back, and the Talismans are really sweet because we can always tap them for a colorless, or if we need that colored mana, we can take 1 damage. And then for like the true ramp spells, we have Rampant Growth and Search for Tomorrow. What's neat about Search for Tomorrow is that it has Suspend 2, so we can just pay a green, exile this, and in 2 upkeeps we're going to cast it for free, and then we can just get a basic land to enter our battlefield untapped, which is really sweet. And for the mana dorks of the deck, we have Llanowar Elves and Elvish Mystic. And there's also Rishkar Pima Renegade, which makes all of our creatures, as long as they have a +1/+1 counter, or it doesn't even specify that +1/+1, as long as they have a counter, they are now a Llanowar Elves, which is really sweet. Moving on to the removal, I had 10 in this deck. So we have Beast Within, Death Sprout, Infernal Grasp, and Crossing Grip. We can destroy creatures, artifacts, enchantments, or even permanents with Beast Within. There's also Negate, which can counter a non-creature spell. We have Putrefy, Return to Nature, and Return to Nature is my ultimate favorite removal spell. We pay 2 and we get to choose between 3 of these modes, which is super helpful. And as for the creatures that are removal for the deck, we have Reclamation Sage, Scavenging Ooze, and Trigon Predator. Reclamation Sage is an ETB, so we can destroy an artifact or enchantment. With Scavenging Ooze, we just pay 1 green mana to exile any card from a graveyard. So this can be someone's win con, something that a player is going to bring back. We can actually exile it instead, and if it happened to be a creature, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on Scavenging Ooze, and we gain 1. Trigon Predator cares about dealing combat damage to a player, and when we do, we can destroy target artifact or enchantment that player controls. Moving on to my favorite part of building any deck is drawing cards. So let's talk about Bident of Thassa and Reconnaissance Mission. Whenever our creatures are going to deal combat damage, we get to draw a card, and since we want to deal combat damage anyways with Cazur, our commander, already giving them a +1/+1 counter if they do, now we're drawing cards off of that. There's also Bread for the Hunt. Whenever a creature we control with a +1/+1 counter deals combat damage to a player, we may draw a card. There's also Cold Eye Selkie. It's a 1/1 with Island Walk, and whenever it deals damage to a player, we draw that many cards. And since on average we can get our creatures to about 6 power before players start really messing with us when it comes to board wipes, removal, and all that, that's 6 cards we can draw off of this one, and that's not including the Bident of Thassa trigger, Reconnaissance Mission, a lot of good stuff. I did put Edric, Spymaster of Trest in here because I think it's a great political card, because as long as our opponents are not hitting us, they get to draw, and this is including us as well. There's also Fathom Mage. Whenever there's a +1/+1 counter put on her, we get to draw a card. So if she were to deal damage, we get to draw a card. Or with other cards I'll mention, we can put counters on her, we'll draw cards that way. There's Greater Good. We can sacrifice a creature and draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power and then discard 3. Like I said, on average we have power 6, so we can draw 6 and discard 3 whenever we sack a creature. Another 2 of my favorites is Return of the Wild Speaker and Rishkar's Expertise. So we'll draw to the greatest power among creatures we control, which is really helpful. Or there's a different mode with Return of the Wild Speaker. We can actually just give all of our huge creatures anyways +3/+3 until end of turn, and with Rishkar's Expertise we can just cast something from our hand with mana value 5 or less without paying its mana cost. Very powerful. And then moving on to the ways where we can put counters on our creatures without dealing combat damage is Contentious Plan and Tezzeret's Gambit. So the keyword proliferate means we can choose any number of permanents and or players and give them an additional counter of what they already have. So those +1/+1 counters, we can put an additional on there, and these cards let us draw cards as well, which is really cool. And speaking of proliferate, let's talk about Evolution Sage. This is a really sweet card because we can just play a land and then we get to proliferate. So at least once each turn we're going to get this trigger. And if we want more counters to put on our creatures, we have cards like Corpsejack Menace and Winding Constrictor. What's really sweet is that Corpsejack Menace says that if one or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, twice that many +1/+1 counters are put on it instead. Wow. So our commander now gives them +2/+2 for their counters, and Winding Constrictor is whenever one or more counters would be placed on an artifact or creature you control, that many +1 are put on it instead, which would still get us the 2 +1/+1 counters from our commander, but remember they're not doubled, it's just that +1. Another sweet one is Verdurous Gearhulk. So this isn't a favorite, at least that I know of anybody, but when it enters the battlefield, we can distribute 4 +1/+1 counters among any number of creatures that we control. It's also a 4/4 with trample, so we could make this an 8/8 with trample, or again just distribute it up to 4 creatures, which is helpful for the deck. There's also Thrumming Bird, again, proliferate whenever it deals combat damage to a player, and it's a 1/1 flyer, so it's likely that this is going to get through. And the last card I want to talk about is Plaxcaster Frogling. When it enters the battlefield, it can come in with 3 +1/+1 counters, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield, we can actually move one of the +1/+1 counters from this onto it. But my favorite part is that we can pay 2 mana, and target creature with a +1/+1 counter on it gains Shroud until end of turn. This is super powerful because if our opponents forget about it, we're just paying 2 mana, and they have to waste a removal spell. Now remember, Shroud is our opponents can't target it, and as well as us, and this is with spells or abilities. Thank you all so much for watching. If you'd like to become a patron, you can help support this channel by doing so, and if you pay the $25 tier, which is the Mango-nificent, you can get a deck tech each month with a video dedicated to you. And if you'd like to see another video dedicated to Drewby, I'll have the video up here, and thank you all for watching, liking, commenting, subscribing. It really helps out the channel, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.